to this morning's presentation. We're excited that you're here. This morning we're going to have a fantastic presentation entitled ACSM Clinical Exercise Physiologist and Profession, What's in it for me? Current Status and Future Opportunities. So this is an hour-long session, and at the end hopefully there will be some time for questions. When that time comes, I would encourage you to come forward to the microphone, state who you are and where you're from, and then ask the question, the specific question, either to Mr. Lynch or to Dr. Roy. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our fantastic speakers. Michael is a registered dietitian in CDE and clinical exercise physiologist at the Nutrition and Diabetes Center in the Lifestyle Medicine program at the University of Washington Medicine and Valley Medical Center. And he serves as the chair of the Clinical Exercise Physiologist Committee and Executive Council of the Committee of Certification and Registry Boards for the American College of Sports Medicine. He is also a columnist for Diabetes Forecast, writing for their Ask the Expert column, and Diabetic Living magazine, writing fitness articles and workout routines for people with diabetes. He has accepted a position to serve on the Board of Advisors for Diabetic Living magazine for 2019. Michael was a reviewer for ACSM's Guidelines for Exercise Testing and Prescription, or GTEP 10. And so we're going to be excited to hear from him first, and following his words, then we'll hear from Dr. Roy, who is at the Kalispell Regional Medical Center, where he oversees 22 different programs for this medical center. So he has quite a bit of experience, including I want to make sure I get this right, 115,000, right, square foot medically integrated fitness centers. It's just a small facility, nothing too big. He has served as the past president of this organization, Northwest ACSM, which was back in the 90s, and he currently serves as the editor-in-chief of the ACSM Health and Fitness Journal. So if you're interested in publications in the future, this is a good man to talk to, I think. He is also an associate editor for the GTEP 11. He serves as the president-elect currently for the Clinical Exercise Physiology Association, and he's on the National Advisory Board for the Exercise Medicine. And he spent some time here in Oregon, in Eugene, also back in the mid-90s. So we're excited to have both of our speakers today, and I encourage you to pay attention and write down any questions that may come to you. And without further ado, I'll turn our time over to Mr. Lynch.
Thank you and good morning. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, very good. So thank you for being here this morning at 8 o'clock, and hope you guys had a great day yesterday. I'm excited to be up here today and speak with you about this process. It's something that, as the previous chair of the RCEP committee, in working with Brad, who was the previous chair of the CEP committee, we've had a real intimate involvement in this process. And so it's both exciting to be here to share with you about this opportunity, as well as just share a little bit about from our experience of it. One thing I did want to clarify in my introduction is I'll be chair of the CEP committee moving forward, but I'm not chair of the executive council. Maybe one day, but not today. So I understand today our mix in our audience might be those of you who have paid attention to the field and watched this process kind of come the debate that's gone on for several years, and kind of observe that debate and what may have happened as a result of that debate and discussion between the CEP and the RCEP certifications, as well as others of you are interested in where you're going to go professionally. And so I'm excited to share a little bit more with you about the CEP certification, because there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm within the ACSM as far as what has been created with what we're kind of calling the CEP 2.0. We really feel like we pulled the RCEP and the CEP, the best of both certifications together to create a new certification, and one that is both forward-thinking as far as where we're at today. Again, for those of you who've been in the field, we see changes as far as the population base that we work with, much more heavy on the chronic and clinical needs, and how we address those needs and facilitate their engagement in the process. So again, for those of you who are considering where you want to go, I hope today you feel informed as well as possibly inspired to go for the CEP certification. I think it'll be well worth it. So sharing a little bit about the backstory, again, maybe to answer some questions, and for those of you who have paid attention to this for a while, as well as for those of you who are, again, thinking about how did this come together and what does this exactly mean as far as this new CEP certification. So innocently enough, I created a few years ago basically a crosswalk document, because there was so much debate and discussion going on between the RCEP, the CEP, and the job tasks, and it was very much understood that those job roles were very similar. But what I found in my observation is a lot of those were just discussions. We would get somewhere in the discussions and then kind of table the discussions and come back and review a lot of the same discussions. So I thought, well, let's just take a look at it. And though, this may not fully strike, oh, I'm sorry, that comes across fairly blurry. If you were able to read it, this is basically an example of some of the domains of the previous certifications between what was the RCEP and the CEP. And again, I apologize, that may not be very clear for you to read right now. But you can read for this particular domain, if you really just take out the specific language and just realize what is actually the responsibilities of the two certifications, they were just so similar side by side. And so in presenting this document to the two committee members as far as RCEP and CEP, everybody, or for the most part, most people looked at it and thought, yeah, these really, really are the same. We have these two different certifications. We're kind of bifurcating our clinical specialists, but at the same time, they're really kind of doing the same tasks. So the question was asked, are they really one and the same? It was our observation that they were, but again, it's not necessarily for us just to make decisions and changes. We wanted to get some feedback. So what we did is we worked really hard to kind of drill down what we thought were essentially the same job tasks between the two certifications. And so again, we wanted feedback, not just from what we think, but from people who are actually doing the job. So we put together a survey and we emailed. Some of you may have gotten this survey, some of you may have taken the survey, provided some feedback. As far as what is the frequency and importance of what essentially your job tasks are. So to qualify some of our data, we just asked for people's gender with, region of practice in the area of country, their degree, their experience, area of practice more specifically, as well as, again, do they have a CEP or an RCEP certification? Some people will have both. So if we look at the results of what that data told us, and I think we had close to 1,000 respondents. We had a good response on this one. You look at, again, they were asked to rate the frequency of what they did from a job task, as well as what they felt was the importance of that job task. And they rated both of those for each job task on both, again, frequency and importance using a 1 to 4 scale. So the results were analyzed by us as well as psychometricians. And when we looked at, there was 30 plus job tasks that we had, and they all came back within 0.2 to 0.25 of each other on a 4-point scale. I wish I could pull a graphic so you could really see just how close they were, but essentially it told us these are the same. I mean, from the field, from what people who are in the trenches doing their job, what they're telling us, it was just too similar. So this is kind of an example of if they were asked on a particular job task. CEPs on this is just a rough example, this isn't exact data, but it would come back something like this. It was just so similar how everybody was seeing the importance and the frequency. So they really illustrated there was just such a lack of a difference or any form of substantial difference. So why, from the standpoint of the ACSM, do we have RCEPs and CEPs in two very different camps in some regards, at least that's how people thought of them, but they're essentially the same in the field. And that's what's most important. So we felt at this point it was the right call for us to make to really thoroughly investigate moving these two certifications forward, which became known as essentially CEP 2.0, which we had some fun with. So again, how did we get here? Now we have this one certification. For those of you who recognize these pictures, you may remember and or lament there was the RCEP there. That essentially is no longer really the case, though we do have what's known as a registry at this point, which is something that Brad is going to talk about. So here we are. So the writing process of the new JTA, and again, for those of you who are considering where you're going to go professionally, or if you're new to certification, the job task analysis is really your basis for what we're defining as essentially the job role, or what we expect you to know as certified professionals. So again, if you're considering where you're going to go, really turn to the job task analysis, or essentially your JTA. And so I apologize again if this is harder to read, but fortunately this one has some colors that you can discern, and this is what I really wanted to show. So we worked very hard between the RCEP committee, which is a group of 5 of us, very well-experienced group of people, as well as the CEP committee, bouncing back and forth, pulling the two JTAs together. Again, a lot of rigor went into this process, and the way I somewhat kind of quarterbacked it, but the color coordinating here is kind of what I want you to see. between the RCEP, we're bringing in from the RCEP, as well as the CEP, the blue here is kind of some new language that we added in here, but it's really pulling it all together here. Again, really trying to merge them as best we can. This went through many revisions, but we feel that we drilled it down into a pretty successful JTA. So just to kind of look at the weighting of what the different criteria was between the RCEP here, looking at the different percentage of the various domains, this was the RCEP, as it was, and this was the CEP. Again, fairly similar, but some different weighting based upon different responsibilities. Again, in the RCEP, you'll see that it had the program administration here and the legal and professional considerations. But this is, in some regards, what also separated the RCEPs. If you look at the weighting for the new CEP certification, you can see that it's similar, but it's also somewhat different. This is something that's really no longer a part of the CEP certification. What we felt is for those who really want to get that experience, there may be another certification created, or possibly like a certificate. If for those of you paying attention to the field, you might be seeing certificates are getting very common and popular these days. So we might look at something like that, but we'll see. But essentially we decided to take that out because there's just so much else that we really need to know from the standpoint of how are we treating our patients. We really wanted to focus on that. So this is essentially the weighting of the various areas. And again, I just encourage you to look at the new CEP JTA, and you'll see how the job tasks are broken down in this process. Also, again, I know you can't see this, but this is where you'll also kind of get an idea of some of the examples of the questions that you might experience as you take the exam, and kind of the thought processes, or what the thought process was from the standpoint of creating the new exam. So, but anyway, not to oversell it, but I'm fairly proud and happy with how this JTA turned out in its final form, which is available for you online if you'd like to take a look at it. So looking at the process, this is more kind of on the back end as far as what ACSM does from the standpoint of the review board for certifications in general. And if you'll see this timeline, one, I want to say that this timeline goes way back, right? This has been, again, a couple-year process. And so this is just looking at the last couple months. And again, this is part of the reason that we're very excited, because we really just completed this process in its final phases within here in the last month here, again, as far as March. Does anybody know anyone who's taken the new CEP certification exam? Okay. We've had a handful of people do that, but no one apparently here has looked at that. So anyway, it's been a process, and so where we're at today, like as of like really basically literally today, is looking at the cut scores. And I think that the final point here will kind of pull this all together. So we looked at the standardization as far as how are we ensuring that the candidates who are taking the exam are set up for success. If you know much about the previous pass rates for the CEP and the RCEP, you'll probably know that they were very low. And that was very unfortunate. And so we wanted to look at how do we facilitate the success of our candidates. And so we went through a very extensive process. We brought in 2 psychometricians to really guide us as subject matter experts as far as the creation of the new exam. How are we doing this correctly? But one thing that was a real change in psychology, if you will, and this came really as a result of Francis Narek, who's the new certification director, is instead of looking at the certification test as far as like, what's the best we can get out of people as far as like, what's the highest standard we can essentially get them to meet, we more took a different route. And this is where certification really is at as far as the field, is what is the minimally qualified candidate? One thing that you will learn, is, especially if you're still in school, is as you get in the field and get that experience, that's where things will really make sense. And in fact, you'll probably actually learn more in that regards. So what we didn't want to do is filter out so many people from actually becoming CEPs or RCEPs so they can never really get that experience, because you're going to learn on the job. All of us are, no matter how well trained you are. Doctors learn on the job, right? Nobody comes into it knowing it all. So we really wanted to pay close attention to this. And so pulling all this data together, there was a cut score range that was created from our NGOF scoring, which is basically looking at how important do we think each question is for each candidate to know. And based upon that, the final cut score was determined to be 65 out of 100. Now, for some of you, you're like, all right, I get A's all the time, B's all the time, 65 out of 100, I got this. Just still be ready, that kind of thing, because 65 might appear fairly low, but again, if we look at the estimated pass rate, even at 65, is expected to be 67%. So that can be good, because if we look at it in comparison, these are the pass rates that are happening in the past. So most people may not have been aware of this, taking the exam, but how would you feel taking the exam if you knew the pass rate was 35%? I'd be a little intimidated. What's, again, unfortunate about where this is at is that if you look at other professions, like passing the bar exam or passing your medical exam, the pass rate's much higher. Why would that be? Why would be those very difficult, strenuous exams and fairly in-depth knowledge bases people had to come in? Why would those pass rates be so much higher? A lot of it had to do with the quality of the test, properly doing psychometrics, and really setting people up for success in their ability to pass the exam so we could get them into the field. Again, I want to be clear, this is not a process of necessarily watering down the exam and just trying to get more people qualified. This was really paying attention to a high-quality exam that is done for the minimally qualified candidate to be able to get into the field and actually make a difference. That was really kind of the thinking. So this is where we're at today. So what do you need as far as if you're on the end of looking at this, where do I want to go? Do I really want to embark upon this? Well, there might be some somewhat rigorous standards there to get this, but in some regards, as far as being qualified to take the exam, that was also, we want to set people up for success, so we want to make sure that we're ready. And this is where we put a fair amount of emphasis on experience. Again, your internships, where you actually see people in the field. You can model, you can shadow, get your hands wet a little bit. You can actually try some things. So when you come in and you get these questions, they might make a little bit more sense to you versus just taking an exam or having read it in a book. So we really want to make sure. The emphasis on this might be a little higher on the master's degree. We wanted to make sure that the door was still open for people who were bachelors, though again, the preparation of it for 1,200 hours, you're going to have to put in some time for that. Again, it's not to filter that out, but we want to set you up for success. So with the master's degree, 600 hours, it's still a fair amount of time, but we felt between that and a master's degree that you should be well set up to pass this exam. Looking at your experience, we want to try to get the qualified candidate a breadth of experience as much as we can. Now, one word to pay attention up to here is this is preferred. If you work in other fields, again, I have an experience as a registered dietitian. There, it's not preferred. You get so many hours in each section, and that's how you qualify to take the exam. We're not necessarily taking it that far for various reasons, but essentially this is preferred. Now, we have people who will review applications and look at that. If you have most of your hours, which a lot of people will, in one section, it doesn't mean you won't be qualified to take the exam, but just understand that you're going to get material on all these questions. So it's kind of behooves you as a candidate to try and get various amounts of experience in different places as best you can. So this is looking at what qualifies for experience. Again, this is something that is available online to be able to see this. But as far as just observing, just kind of sitting here, looking, watching people do their work, doesn't necessarily qualify. We want you actually working. And so personal training is great, but we're also looking to possibly go a little bit more clinically oriented that. So that was decided to not necessarily constitute hours. So again, as far as preparing, we have some fabulous resources that are becoming more available. ACSM is putting a lot of energy into higher quality, very accessible resources for exams for various reasons. The GTAP, you're probably very aware of. GTAP 11 is already en route. In fact, Brad's having a very lot of what am I trying to say? What are you doing with that?
All the clinical chapters.
All the clinical chapters, so all the clinical chapters of the new GTAP 10, so that's pretty amazing. So this is one that you'll of course want to pay attention to, we all know that. But one that is emphasized as far as preparing for this exam, if you haven't read or acquired the resource manual, is one that I would highly recommend. In my experience of preparing for the exam, I really found this to be a fantastic resource. And so as you're preparing for this, again, this elaborates a lot on this, but this really tells you in many regards what you need to know. So at this point in our process, this is kind of the backstory. This is where we're at today. I'm going to go ahead and transition to Dr. Roy, and he's going to take you now into the field and what you might be able to gain as far as professional, as far as being a CEP. Okay? Do you need the mic?
And of course, my slides don't look like they fit on the screen, but we'll make it work one way or the other. So that really says, now I've graduated, now I'm certified, what's next? And I'd like to talk a little bit about what those opportunities might be. What did I just do? I broke it. I shouldn't talk two things at once. Is that good? Awesome. So really, it's your foundation that is so important. You know, when you're trying to build a really tall pyramid, the wider the base, the higher the peak. That's really what you have to get. So it's not all about your education, because that's very theoretical, and you're learning a lot of great stuff. You get out into the working world, and it becomes a whole different situation, and you have to really be able to process and think and everything. The certification, it says I meet the minimum standards, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful in that job. A lot of it really comes down to your experience. And, your career is a journey, and you gain that experience throughout your entire career. Very few people ever start at the top. They work their way up, and actually the harder you have to work and gain that experience, the more successful that you're going to be. So one of the things that the Clinical Exercise Physiology Association has taken on, because the old RSEP certification was built around the idea that we would have this functional registry, and it might eventually lead us into licensure for all of the clinical exercise physiology professionals. Unfortunately, that registry just became a title. That registry never happened. It never was functional. There wasn't a place you could go and look up the registered clinical exercise physiologists and find out something about them. It wasn't a good registry. And so that was one of the things now with the change in the certifications and merging into the new certification. ACSM is just focusing on the certification side. The Clinical Exercise Physiology Association has taken on the registry, and it's actually it is a real functional registry. You can go, employers can go onto it, they can look people up, they can find out about them, their history. Is going to be a very good tool for all of us to be using. And there are some requirements then to be on that particular registry. For those people that are former RSEPs, they're automatically brought onto the registry. That's already happened. So anybody that is an RSEP, CEPA has already made that transition, and you're part of that. You should have gotten a letter. Informing you of that. For people who had the former clinical exercise physiologist certification and had a graduate degree, a master's or a PhD, and at least 1 year of experience, all you really need to do is pick up some extra continuing education credits, fill out the application on the CEPA website, where a committee will review all of that, and you basically will get brought onto the registry. For those people that are at a bachelor's level and were former CEPs, it requires a little bit more experience and the same bump up in the continuing education, and then you can go through that application process as well. So everybody who had the former clinical exercise physiologist certification has a route to get into the registry without having to go and take the new exam and go through all of that. For those of you that are going and moving on to the new exam, am I going the wrong way with these? Nope, I'm right. Just look through it. Once again, it comes down to the experience and the education, but you can take the new exam and you have the graduate degree. You only need 1 year of experience and the required continuing education. You can move into the registry. At the bachelor's level, once again, it's more experience. We really feel that's important to be successful out there before you can make that move. So the big question is that, I'm educated, I'm certified, I've got onto the registry and stuff, but is there really a job out there for me? And that has been a struggle. And there's a lot of people in the exercise science world that have moved into physical therapy and other professions where they have a license and an opportunity to move on, and those are certainly options for people to continue to do. But I do think that more and more you're going to see this clinical exercise physiologist profession grow and expand, especially in the environment that we have within healthcare today. I can tell you that, you know, in the fitness world, the personal trainers, fitness instructors, you know, there's a lot of jobs out there. They're continuing to grow. There's a relatively good income. In fact, some personal trainers, the median pay is about $39,000. I know personal trainers make $160,000 a year. It just depends how entrepreneurial you are and how much you're out there beating the bushes and getting clients and doing good work with them. There's certainly good opportunities there. On the clinical exercise physiologist side, the median salary is close to $50,000 a year, but once again, there's people in the medical profession that are up in the $80,000 a year, and I think those salaries will grow also out into the future. So there is more and more opportunities coming with that, but most of those people are at the graduate degree level. I think that extra training and education, or certainly the experience that you gain, is going to be really important to advancing within those careers in the future. So what do these people, where do these people work? Oftentimes they're in the community, they can be in corporate fitness centers, but most often you're finding your clinical exercise physiologists in more of your hospital-based or your medically integrated fitness centers. Working with people that have chronic health conditions is the most common, and historically most CEPs and even RCEPs were working in cardiac and pulmonary rehab. But you're beginning to see more and more of a transition into neuromuscular and other types of conditions because our society is just gamut with all these chronic diseases. And most of them are preventative. And so healthcare is really trying to figure all of this out. And you know, we have certainly the illness side, and we know how to treat all of that. We're trying to figure out, what do you do with population health? What in the world is that? How do you get into prevention? The slide on the bottom right says you've got a rare condition called good health. Frankly, we're not sure how to treat it. That's healthcare today. They're still sorting all of that out. And if you look at the way we spend our money in healthcare, the vast majority of the money is spent on treatment. And we get rewarded for it. We have this stuff now where you're getting rewarded for taking care of your patients. So they have high blood pressure, you normalize the blood pressure, you get extra money in your clinic, right? And I can do that. I can give them a medication, I can lower the blood pressure. Wow, we've done really well. Pay for performance. And very little money historically has gone onto the preventative side. That has got to change. But I can tell you, healthcare systems are still following the money. And the money is still on the treatment side. So there's a lot of work that we all have to do together to try to change that picture. And this whole idea of prevention is not new. This is the Emperor's textbook of internal medicine from back in 3000 BC. And it talked about prevention was the key to long life. Boy, are we slow learners. And then what's the hot item that's been out there the last few years? Doing exactly what you're doing right now, right? Sitting is the new smoking. It's really bad for you and stuff, and we're promoting that and telling people to get up and move. But Bernardo Rosini, who is an Italian physician who really was the founder of occupational medicine, in 1713 said, those men who sit at work and are therefore called chair workers, such as cobblers and tailors, suffer from their own particular diseases, suffer from general ill health caused by their sedentary life. Those workers should at least exercise on holidays to counteract harm done by many days of sedentary life. Does that sound familiar? And here we are today thinking, boy, this is the new hot thing. I tell you, it's nothing new. And I've got about 20 more slides like that. I didn't put them in this presentation. You can go through. What comes around, we're just really slow to get it. And then in 1995, they pulled, the ACSM and a whole group of other researchers pulled together a lot of the compendium of all the research that had been done on physical activity at that time, which eventually led into the 1996 Surgeon General's report on physical inactivity that has now been renewed into the physical activity guidelines for Americans in 2018, and the new ones that were just updated. But this is just one of those studies out there. It was a real aha moment. There's a study on mild hypertension. There was a medication group, so it was a randomized controlled trial, medication group and an exercise group. Who had the better numbers at the end of the study? What's that? the exercise group, guess what? It was the medication makers. We can take any number, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, bad blood sugar, we can treat it with a medication, and we can get that number down. And that's the pay for performance in healthcare today. But what was the reality of this study? Who had the better outcomes? Who had the better health outcomes in the long term? You know what? It was the exercisers. There's something about exercising. There's something about appropriate nutrition that turns those cells on and gives you the preventative thing rather than artificially lowering it. We could fix 85% of chronic health conditions if we went more with a lifestyle medicine approach rather than putting them onto these very, very expensive medications that can run hundreds of thousands of dollars for some conditions and stuff. And that's one of the reasons healthcare is so expensive. So it's a real aha moment, and there's been a lot of advances even since those studies, continuing to tell us that exercise is really the foundational part of good health, and it fits in with lots of different disease conditions that we have today. And I'm not telling you anything new, I know you all know that. But here's the problem we still have. I don't have time for my doctor appointment. Go in my place and tell him you're having trouble sleeping at your desk. And don't let him sleep talk you about diet and exercise. I want pills. Right? That's what the medical providers are still being pushed at. That's even the clinical exercise physiologists. You know, they're not getting their patients because people want to be treated. And is that really good medicine? Because people take medications and there's always adverse reactions and side effects to that. In the elderly, there's a lot of falls. You know, one of the worst things an elderly person can do is fall and break their hip. Falls are often created because of the medications they're taking. All of you have heard of what's happening with narcotics and those issues that we have out there. So pills are not necessarily the best answer, but it's typically where we go. The reality is we do have a drug, and it's called exercise. The generic name is physical activity. There's other brand names: walking, jogging, hiking, rolling, swimming, dancing, gardening, all kinds of things. There's a dosage for it, right? 150 minutes is optimum, 60 minutes per day in children has efficacy. But you know, really you can start low and you can build up from there. You don't have to start right at the top. And it's safe for people that are pregnant or lactating with their new baby and stuff. There's lots of indications for usage. So prevent obesity, prevent heart disease, prevent osteoporosis, all different kinds of reasons that we can put people on this particular medication. And it has a dose-response relationship, right? Small doses have benefit. A little bit bigger doses have more benefit, and eventually that begins to plateau out, and maybe we get into the side where too much is not a good thing for us. And there are some side effects. I'm sorry, you might have decreased blood pressure, heart rate, your blood sugar might be better, you might have stronger muscles and bones. There are side effects to this medication. Adverse reactions, of course, sweating. Sweat, right? If you overdose on it, you might get injured. So you certainly got to be careful with that. The administration, the good thing is it can self-administer or it can be done with others. And it's as needed. And the refills are unlimited. You don't have to go back to a provider to get refill permission to do this prescription. So the reality is that we have an agent with lipid-lowering, antihypertensive, positive inotropic, negative chronotropic, vasodilating, diuretic, anorexigenic, weight-reducing, carthitic, hypoglycemic, tranquilizing, hypnotic, and antidepressant qualities, and that medication is called exercise. We need to use it. And that's really what the profession of clinical exercise physiology is all about. And as you move into that, that's what we're using to help treat people. I like the acronym NEURO. NEURO stands for nutrition. You want to really move people to more of a plant-based, whole food diet. The U stands for unwind, stress management. The E is for exercise or movement. The R is for restorative sleep, with the emphasis on the word restorative. And then the O is for optimization of your cognitive function, complex movements, things that make you think deeply, social interaction, and those kinds of things. That's the medicine that we need to do moving out in the future. So CEPs, clinical exercise physiologists, typically work with patients with cardiovascular disease. They've done that for a long time in cardiac rehab. Right now, the peripheral arterial disease is now a covered diagnosis, and a lot of cardiac rehab programs are bringing that on, although it really is a separate Medicare reimbursement for that program. It's not cardiac rehab, it really is PAD. pulmonary disorders, so pulmonary rehab continues to grow and to develop and working with those patients. More and more clinical exercise physiologists are seeing patients with metabolic disorders. A lot of them have become diabetic educators that they're qualified to do. There's lots of area and room within this whole area. The rheumatic diseases, so your people with arthritis and other types of conditions. Obesity is certainly a problem across the country, and you know, it's not all about exercise. Certainly nutrition and other things come into all of that. Cognitive diseases. You know, when I gave you the neuro acronym, I stole that from two neurologists that were at UCSD in San Diego and moved up to Loma Linda. And their whole research has been on Alzheimer's patients. And they were getting very frustrated at UCSD and having to tell their patients and their families, you know, this is what you've got. You better go get your things in order because this is the progression. There's nothing we can do. They got tired of telling their patients to that. They moved to Loma Linda, which really has a real strong lifestyle emphasis. They began treating their patients with, in fact, in Alzheimer's, there's been like 403 clinical trials on 250 medications, and not one has worked yet. So in Loma Linda, they began to use the lifestyle medicine with their patients, and they started getting reversal in Alzheimer's on MRI data and having a lot of success with that. That's where I stole that acronym neuro from. But there is a lot of value in physical activity with the Alzheimer's patients and getting them moving. But here's the problem we still run into. It says, sorry, I'm late, Maura. I went for a blood test. I finally decided to have a complete physical. Yeah, that's something I should do too. But I'd like to lose a little weight first, exercise, tone up a bit, you know, do all the stuff that I was supposed to do after I had my last physical, right? So we, as medical professionals, are really good at diagnosing and telling people what to do and sending them out the door, and they don't follow through. And year after year, they come back and they keep getting in this downhill spiral. You know, we have to change that pattern in some way. And the reality is that everybody needs a coach. And this is really where health and wellness coaching is starting to really move into healthcare and into the profession. And in my opinion, I think that all clinical exercise physiologists, even exercise physiologists at that level, need to go and get good training in behavior change, or even become a certified health and wellness coach. We employ about 30 of them within our medically integrated fitness center. They're working with everything from our really bad chronic disease patients all the way up to employers within their wellness programs. But really helping people, meeting them where they're at, helping them to understand their why. You know, most people that join a fitness facility, why do they join? If you ask them, what's their first reason? Lose weight, right? And then if you really dug down into, you know, why? What is it you really want out of this? It's not losing weight. They don't, in fact, they probably might even not know what that real why is. And that's what coaching is all about. It meets them where they're at, helps them identify what that why is, and begins to build off of all of that. So really important. And health and wellness coaching is, I think, you know, I was really worried for a while it would go the direction that personal training is gone. You know, you can go online and you can get your personal training certification tonight just by paying a fee and stuff. There's a zillion of them out there. There's very few that are really robust and good. And I was worried that health and wellness coaching might go the same way. The good thing is that a lot of the strong organizations that were offering that certification, like Well Coaches, came together. They created the National Consortium for Credentialing Health and Wellness Coaches. There now is a national certification exam that you can sit for. It was launched last September, and I think that profession is really going to grow within healthcare. Health and wellness coaches eventually are going to be integrated into primary care offices. The physicians do not have the time to do that kind of coaching, but the outcomes that they're going to have to be generating in the future are going to force it to move into that direction. Now in our community, our wellness center is integrated onto our hospital campus, so they're all referred in. In our Journey to Wellness program, which is the coaching-based chronic disease program, we've put about 2,000 people through this program, and the outcomes have been spectacular. So it's a great opportunity to move into, and I really encourage you to be thinking about that and adding that to your toolbox as you go forward. So let me just tell you a little bit about my career, right? I didn't get to where I am today just right out of the box. I started out in high school. I was a miler, and I ran 420 in the mile back in the late 60s, early 70s. Got a scholarship to Point Loma Nazarene College in San Diego to be a distance runner, and I thought, I really want to be a coach. I want to coach distance runners, and I started out working on my master's degree in physical education. To become a coach, I left in my junior year because I got an opportunity to coach at my old high school with those distance runners. I got my undergraduate degree, and then I got a job at the community college and started coaching there. And went back for my master's degree at that point and say, I just want to continue at the community college. I want to teach there. I mean, you had to have that master's degree. In my master's degree program, though, I was underneath two really renowned scientists. One was Dr. Fred Cash, who really was one who got adult fitness, and his partner, Dr. John Boyer, who was a cardiologist. They were some of the early people in cardiac rehab back in the early 60s. And they really turned me on to this whole concept of healthcare. And so I started thinking, well, I want to do something maybe a little bit different. So as I finished my master's degree, I went up to Bishop, California, and I worked for a cardiologist there, and I did about everything in his office, just was gaining experience. I did his echoes, I did his exercise tests, I saw his patients and just made medication lists. I did everything because he didn't have a nurse, he didn't have other people in that office, and it was a tremendous experience. But I was still running a lot, and then at those days I was into running marathons, and so I finally got attracted. I went on staff with Athletes in Action, which is kind of the athletic arm of Campus Crusade for Christ, and I ran for them for 2 years, and I ran well in the marathon. I ran 4:21 in Eugene at the Nike Marathon. That was my PR and stuff, and continued in that path for a couple of years. And then I met my wife, and I couldn't see her giving up a nursing career to be a secretary with Athletes in Action, so I went to the hospital in Eugene, Sacred Heart Medical Center. They had just bought a cardiopulmonary exercise testing system. They didn't know what to do with it. So I basically walked into a job that day. We started the lab in respiratory care, and the next year a cardiologist came and founded the Oregon Heart Center, and so we moved that whole lab to the Oregon Heart Center, and I had the opportunity then to really grow and to build within that and gain a lot of experience with cardiovascular patients over the next 11 years, and also had the privilege of teaching. I'm the adjunct faculty for a couple of years at the U of O, so it was a great experience. And then in 1995, there was an ad in a journal at the Heart Center that was out on the table, and there was this little town of Kalispell, Montana. They were building this big health and wellness center, and they needed someone to come up and be the director. And I just threw it across the table and said, who wants to move to Montana? That's the end of the world. And one of my coworkers says, I dare you to call. So I called. And I ended up talking to a cardiologist, Loring Brock, who was also in the 1960s one of the other founders of cardiac rehab in Colorado. And I ended up flying up to Eugene, and before I left the interview, I got offered the job, which was like, I'm like, why would you do that? You got 30 more people to interview. And it was funny, the CEO there said, it's kind of like you go into a clothing store, and you walk in, and there's a coat on the rack, and you see it, and then you go and you look at all the other coats, and then you come back and buy that coat. You kind of feel like that. And said, wow, you guys are really nice. But anyway, I got up there and I realized that it was a real challenge because the medical staff had been left out of building this fitness center, and they were ticked. You're building a jock shop and I can't get my echo machine, and you're spending all this money on that. So my job for the first couple of years was to bring peace with the medical staff, and we built this different model that was a medically integrated model. So cardiac rehab, instead of being in its own little room, was integrated out on the main fitness center. We telemetried the entire center, and they're out there with everybody else working out side by side, and built that kind of a model over time. And then we got a new CEO about the second year that I was there, and she started challenging me to learn more about healthcare management. And she challenged me to take my board certification as a healthcare executive. And so I did that. And then she started giving me more and more departments. And one time I had 32 different departments. I was overseeing pharmacy and PT and OT, and I got a research institute started and stuff. And it was just that journey. And that's where I'm at today. I've fortunately been able to give up a couple of those departments. I only have 22 rather than 32. But my point of being for all of you, to maybe as a way of encouragement, is that it is a journey. And you gain those experiences as you go along. And every little experience you do builds on the next one. And in today's fast food society, we're looking out there and we want the top right now. And if you get to the top too fast and you don't have the foundation to really support you, you end up failing. Don't be afraid to work your way up and to gain as many experiences as you can, to ask really hard and tough questions, because that's how you advance and you get going. And that's really what my journey was all about with that. And at the same time, I've had some tremendous opportunities, even with ACSM and other organizations. You mentioned that I oversee the Health and Fitness Journal for the American College of Sports Medicine. We have some special columns that run in there, one of the columns has been a certification column. We're now changing that. So with the next issue of the Health and Fitness Journal, that's going to be a case study one. We'll be presenting a case study. In fact, the journal will come out, and then we're going to be actually going over that case study at the Health and Fitness Summit in Chicago. But we're going to be building more and more case studies in there, which will be a great tool for you to learn, kind of how to think through a case and how to build exercise treatment within that. There's also, twice a year we do a themed issue. So the themed issue in September, October is going to be on combating physical activity. All those articles are in now, and I can tell you it's going to be a stellar issue, so be looking for that as well. And if you're not part of the ACSM Alliance, it's really cheap to join, like $10 or something, and the journal becomes part of that. The other thing is there's an opportunity to become involved with the Clinical Exercise Physiology Association. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a student, even a student membership, it's a great organization to become part of. We are really trying to grow this whole field of clinical exercise physiology. And in order to do that, we need more people to get involved. In states that have previously tried to tackle the licensure, and only one has ever been successful, they've always been blocked by organizations like the Physical Therapy Association because they have 200,000 professionals, and we have a couple thousand. So we really need to grow, and we're making inroads with them right now. There's going to be, I think, more and more opportunities into the future. And there will be a lot of us that are here after this presentation and the next one. If any of you are interested in becoming part of CEFA, we'll be happy to help you with that. So with that, I'm going to stop. We've got about 13 minutes for questions. If you want to come to the mic and just tell us who you are, Michael and I will do our best to try to answer that. Someone must have a question. We'll put you to sleep at 8 in the morning. Aaron's going to, we got a couple. Amen.
Warm up. Thank you, guys. Brad, you mentioned that you incorporate health coaches in even your clinical programs, like cardiac rehab. How does that work from a reimbursement standpoint?
Well, the reimbursement for cardiac rehab is set on guidelines that come out from Medicare. So what we've done is taken our cardiac rehab staff members and given them that behavior change training. And so the way they approach their patients and everything has that concept built into it. However, the monitored exercise sessions that you're being reimbursed for, those really haven't changed. They're just on the staff. They're on the staff. They're just part of those staff members. So those nurses, those exercise professionals that are working in the cardiac rehab program, we've also given them the behavior change training.
Hey Brad, thank you for that. I'm Matt Silvers of Whitworth University, and I'm curious. So I've been to your facility. It's a wonderful facility, and like you said, it's quite unique in that there's more of a medical focus tied into that wellness facility. And my experience has been that there's few facilities like that, particularly on the scale that yours is. I can think of maybe just a handful. So for the majority of the students or the people who are in here, given that the focus should be on prevention and that the health and wellness coaching, the CP certifications are kind of the next step if you want to get into that, what recommendations would you provide based on your experience of how they might be able to create jobs, so to speak? I mean, as you mentioned, traditionally you're going through maybe like a cardiac or pulmonary rehab type of facility, but there's not a lot of those. So should they be going to maybe your average gym, or should they be going to different medical practices and trying to petition using some of the exercises medicine documents, some of the CEPA documents, and saying, hey, we think that this is really worthwhile and can be an additive type of service in your clinic? I guess it just seems like the jobs aren't necessarily there. So what tangible steps, if I say it simply, would you recommend people take to try and create some of those jobs?
Sure, great question. So first of all, there are about 1,000 medically integrated fitness centers across the country. I mean, they're not all as big as ours, and there's some that are much, much bigger, so they are out there. So there are opportunities within that realm. And the Medical Fitness Association is the organization most of those belong to, and you can get a lot of information from that. Secondly, a lot of this regular fitness centers are moving into this territory very quickly. They're not going to be doing cardiac rehab necessarily within their center because current reimbursement requires that a provider be present within that facility during the time that they're seeing those patients in order to get reimbursement. But more of the musculoskeletal, some of the other metabolic disorders and things, you're starting to see a lot of fitness centers move into that territory. And I think that you can tap into those fitness centers as a highly educated exercise professional and help them develop those programs. The Claremont Club in California, Pomona, California area, they do a tremendous job in the whole area of people with musculoskeletal traumatic brain injuries, that whole space, and all of that inclusive type of stuff. They have tremendous testing capabilities. They're doing a lot of training. You're seeing a lot of that developing. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunities that way. You know, going and knocking on medical practice doors and stuff is really tough. One, it's intimidating for the professional to do it. Secondly, the providers don't have a lot of time. And they don't have a lot of patience for that. So in finding ways to connect with others in those medical systems, it might be their nurses or office professionals and stuff, begins to, I think, build you into that. And then I think there's also this whole area of lifestyle medicine is going to grow a lot. And there's a new organization out there, it's a few years old, American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I went to their first meeting about 4 years ago, and they had about 400 physicians there. This last year they had like 1,500. It's growing dramatically. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in these lifestyle medicine type practices. They are hiring exercise professionals to work within their practices. So that field is going to grow. It's another organization to be looking at. So I think there are opportunities coming. And in some ways you just kind of have to beat the door. And I think also working with organizations like CEPA, where we can network together and we can try to push things within states is another way to go with that. And you have some ideas, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, actually I do. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you think your doctors know what the ACSM is? Seriously. So raise them high. So about maybe a quarter, a third of the room believes that your doctor even knows what the ACSM is? I actually say that's pretty accurate. I was expecting more show of hands. And I would say that's my experience as well. For the facility that I work at in Seattle, which is part of the University of Washington Medical System, I facilitate behavior modification training for our residency program. And I used to say, yeah, I'm the chair of the RCEP committee at the ACSM. They wouldn't ask, what's the RCEP committee? They would ask, what's the ACSM? So if you were here in my presentation yesterday, one thing that I tried to really encourage was trying to put yourself in the mindset of who you're working with. As you're working with medical providers, again, I think lifestyle medicine is obviously something that they're attracted to for various reasons, both from a health perspective as well as time perspective, efficiency perspective, but don't assume that they know or understand what you do. You've been drilled on the benefits of exercise, and that's fantastic. They haven't necessarily had that experience. Of course, they're intelligent people, but you're looking at it from a different perspective. So don't go in there and assume that. If you want to work and sell yourself on that, I think that's fantastic. And in my experience, I am beginning a private practice where I live in Edmonds, Washington, both in nutrition and clinical exercise physiology, being able to address both of those. And in my experience of putting together some promotional materials and just gently opening up the conversation, it's been warm and inviting. Oh, great. Because I don't really have the time. That's wonderful. Again, I'm not assuming they know what I know, but I can see that they have a need and I can service their need. The last point, and kind of where you're going to, is think about being an entrepreneur. I'm excited about it. In our field, there's going to be tons of opportunities. So we continue to talk about the umbrella of working under medical systems, and that's fantastic. And I would echo what Brad was saying. Get your foundation before you try to go right for the top. So maybe don't start this tomorrow, but get a little bit of experience. But think about that. Entrepreneurism right now is taking off, and it's fascinating. I'm just as excited about that as I am about my nutrition and exercise stuff. So it's great, but again, there's going to be tons of opportunity. And how can you service a need, which is rampant at this point? So just want to encourage that.